Yo, Darious Britt here. This is part 2 of a closer look at Iron Man. We're going to take a look at a few scenes, talk about the cinematography, the blocking, etc, etc. If you want to gain a better understanding of how to tell a story with the camera, or how to move the camera, or the psychology of certain shots, then it really helps to study other movies. Let's get into it. First scene.
Shrapnel. Tony gets the details from Jensen about the new life-saving device in his chest. We open the scene close on a pot of stew and tilt up to Tony sitting in the background. Again, we're taking advantage of Z-space, racking focus from foreground to background. When Jensen gives Tony the bottle of shrapnel, we cross the eye line to the other side. The rest of the conversation is shot from the other side of the eye lines. We start on the left side of the actor's eye lines, then cross over to the right side. I'm assuming they cross the eye line to visually convey how Tony feels about this new information with the shrapnel in his heart. That's a big change to adjust to. When we cross the eye line and shoot from the other side, the scene looks slightly different to the audience as well because we're seeing things from another side. It's a subtle change.
Next.
Tony's legacy. Tony learns that the 10 Rings insurgents have been using Tony's weapons and he's not happy about it. Let's look at the shots.
I'm sure they're looking for you, Stark. They will never find you in these mountains.
We push in slowly on Tony as he thinks.
That is your legacy, Stark.
The reverse 2 shot with him and Jensen also pushes in slowly on Tony. We've got a heavy emphasis on Tony here. It's a big moment for him. What's he gonna do about the terrorist using his weapons? On Tony's close-up, the camera is slightly above Tony's eye line, looking down at him. I imagine Tony feels pretty small and helpless, and the camera looking down on him communicates that visually. In the 2 shot with Tony and Jensen, we aren't looking down on Tony, but that's because we're framing for both Tony and Jensen in the same shot. We are, however, taking advantage of the foreground and background action, shifting focus between Jensen and Tony as they speak. In terms of lighting, we've got the fire as the key light and the blue kicker on Tony to separate him from the background. In the reverse 2 shot, the fire still seems to be the key for both characters. The blue kicker light that separates Tony from the background now acts as a blue fill for Jensen. Jensen doesn't need a kicker light for separation because the contrast between him and the blue wash of light on the wall behind him already separates him from the background.
Next.
Pouring metal. Does anybody notice anything interesting about this shot?
Careful.
We've seen this shot before already, covering a different scene. We start in tight on something and then we pull out following the action.
Next.
Game time. So Tony and Jensen play some games and get to know each other better. Do you notice anything? We've seen this type of shot before already. Enter the scene close on something and pull out to reveal the characters. In this case, we're not following any sort of mobile action. We're staying right here at the table.
Next.
Dedication. Tony's got 24 hours to make a missile, but he's gonna make an Iron Man suit instead. I'd have done the same thing if I had an IQ of over 9,000. Let's take a look at the shots. We start with the camera low, pushing in, angled up at Tony. Again, looking up at our subjects always empowers them, gives them authority. We've got a key light motivated by the fire. Then we cut to a profile of Tony. We've got some backlight action happening, key light motivated from the fire, and a kicker light giving Tony some separation from the background. We don't have any fill light, which gives this dark, edgy look.
So serious.
Then we get this awesome backlit shot of Tony cooling the face mask. This backlight was not a coincidence.
Next time you're doing something epic, make sure you're backlit while you're doing it. You'll look twice as epic.
Let's talk about the lighting setup in the cave. They've set up these blue practical lights all around the cave that serve 2 functions.
1.
They provide illumination for the walls and such in the background, so we're not just looking at darkness.
2.
They give you some great backlighting opportunities.
3.
They serve as motivational sources of light. Because they've established that there are so many of these practical lights all around the cave, the filmmakers could pretty much place a light anywhere they needed to, and we'd buy that it was coming from one of those lights in the cave, as long as it were blue or white. We won't even ask where the light's coming from.
Next.
The announcement. So Tony's just been rescued, and this is his first press conference since getting home. Most of the coverage is fairly conventional, but when Tony announces he's shutting down the weapons division of Stark Industries, we get this slow push in.
I had my eyes open. I came to realize.
If you notice, every time Tony either thinks about making a major decision or makes a major decision, the camera always does this sort of push in for visual emphasis.
Next.
New ideas. Tony's shocked the media with his announcement to terminate the weapons division, and Obadiah isn't super happy about it. We start off with some foreground background action. When Obadiah walks in and looks at Tony, we see Tony's reaction in the same shot.
Oh, that went well.
Two birds with one stone. The blocking helps to tell the story as well.
The building,
And what we do keeps the world from falling into chaos.
not based on what I saw.
When Obadiah is grilling Tony about his decision, he's to the left of Tony. But when the subject changes to the arc reactor technology that Tony proposes, Obadiah makes his way to the right side of Tony.
Project. The arc was never cost effective. We knew that before we built it. Never
told you?
mind who told me.
Rhodey.
Show me.
Rhodey or Pepper? It's Rhodey or Pepper.
I want to see it.
Once they reach an agreement, they leave framed together. We start the scene off with Obadiah entering by himself and end the scene with Obadiah and Tony leaving frame together. The blocking and the visuals reflect the change that's actually happened in the scene itself.
Next.
Pepper's help. Pepper helps Tony mount the new arc reactor in his chest. We've got a medium shot of Pepper entering, then a medium wide of Tony foregrounded with Pepper in the background. We've got a reverse two shot of Tony as Pepper approaches, and then back to the main shot. Pepper walks right into a two shot with Tony and the scene continues. Two birds with one stone. Notice anything? This is roughly the same entrance shot that was used before when Pepper spoke to Tony in the beginning of the movie. Pepper enters the lab and walks into a two shot.
Next.
Surprise news. Tony orders a drink when Christy lays some hard-hitting news on him about his company's involvement in the latest atrocity. We start the scene off with Tony ordering a drink.
2 vodka martinis, extra dry, extra olives, extra fast.
In the same shot, we see Christy approaching from the background. We get Tony's reaction as he turns to the camera. We track left as Christy walks into a two shot, setting up the rest of the scene. We knock out 4 units of action in one shot. If you don't want your films to look cutty, it's nice to find ways to cover more action with less shots.
Next.
Double dealing. Tony confronts Obadiah about the double dealing, and he's not happy. The blocking here is interesting.
Huh? What's going on?
Tony, you can't afford to be this naive.
As the actors move around one another, the camera moves around the actors, creating a disorienting feeling. Visually, this mimics what Tony must be feeling. The ground is moving beneath him. He doesn't feel very anchored.
Who do you think locked you out?
When Obadiah finally reveals his treachery, we push in on Tony, drawing the focus for dramatic effect. Then we pull away from Tony as Obadiah leaves. With this camera move, Tony gets smaller in size as the shot continues. His reduced size in the frame visually reflects his feeling of powerlessness.
Next.
Pepper refuses. Tony asks Pepper to steal files from Stark Industries, and she refuses. Basically, she thinks he's on a suicide mission.
This will get you in. It's probably under executive files. If not, they put it on a ghost drive, in which case...
For the first part of the conversation, we're on one side of the eye line. Tony looks camera left, and Pepper looks camera right.
Art opening. There is no benefit. There is nothing to sign. There is the next mission.
But when Pepper drops the thumb drive and walks away, we cross the 180 line to the other side.
Well, then I quit.
You stood by my side all these years while I reaped the benefits of destruction.
Now Tony's looking camera right, and Pepper's looking camera left. This visually reflects the shift in the dynamic of Tony and Pepper's relationship. This is the first time she does not agree with him on something, and she's adamantly refusing to do what he asks. Up to this point in the conversation, Tony has been on the defense, but when he sits down, we move into a different beat. Now Tony's more vulnerable and he's more open.
I'm not going to be a part of it.
I shouldn't be alive. Unless it was for a reason.
We're using the actors blocking here to signal a change in beat. When Pepper finally agrees to help Tony, we move back across the actor's eye line again, back to where we started.
You're all I have too, you know.
Pepper looks screen right, and Tony looks screen left.
Next.
Tony's in trouble. When Obadiah steals the arc reactor out of Tony's chest, we get this nice Dutch angle. It feels disorienting and off-kilter. Another instance of camera placement being inspired by the character's subjective experience.
Well, that's part 2 of Iron Man, a closer look. I mean, talked about part 1, and we talked about part 2. I'm done freaking talking about Iron Man. Go watch somebody else's channel about stuff. Well, that's all I got for you. If you enjoyed what you saw, please like, go subscribe. You can find me on the social medias, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or the Twitter, baby. You can also check out my second YouTube channel, Darious BRITT, where I vlog about my adventures on the film festival circuit, my first feature-length film on sound, live casting, vlogs, etc., etc. I do believe that's all I got for you, suckers. D-Bird out.